This narrative is titled, Dad Found Out My Salary Then Tried to Hand My House to My Spoiled Sister, so I Made Him Regret It. Before we dive into the video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel's growth has slowed down, and subscribing is one of the best ways to support us. It's quick, free, and helps us continue bringing you great content. Your support truly means a lot. Let's work together to keep this channel thriving. Thanks a ton. And now, let's get started with the video. So, for obvious reasons, I'll keep it brief. Hey everyone, I've been trying to write this post for about an hour now, but I keep deleting and starting over. I really need to get this off my chest because it's been eating me up. I'm 31 years old, a male, and I work as a real estate developer now, but all of this started when I was 15. My biological mother passed away from cancer when I was 4. When I turned 7, my dad, who was 42 at the time, married a woman I'll refer to as Beth, who was 35. At first, she seemed nice, doing the whole over-the-top stepmom act. But things changed after she had my half-sister, Jenny. Dad became really harsh on me, like incredibly strict. Nothing I did ever seemed good enough for him. I still remember getting a B+ on a tough chemistry test, and instead of being proud, he just said, "Why isn't this an A?" I made the basketball team, and he asked, "Why aren't you starting?" It was stuff like that all the time. But with Jenny, it was a completely different story. She could fail a test, and they'd comfort her with, "It's okay, you tried your best." Beth made sure Jenny was treated like royalty, while I was just the guy who always messed things up. Looking back, I'm pretty sure I had ADHD or something undiagnosed. I couldn't sit still in class, had trouble focusing, and stuff like that. Instead of trying to understand what was wrong, Dad would just yell at me saying, "Why can't you be normal like your sister?" Meanwhile, Beth would nod in agreement, acting like I was the problem. Dad worked long hours at his construction company, so he wasn't home much. That's when Beth really showed her true colors. She'd forget to make enough dinner, so I'd have to make my own sandwich. Or she'd purposely wash my clothes wrong, causing them to shrink or get ruined. Little things I couldn't really prove. If I tried telling Dad, he'd accuse me of causing trouble, because that's what Beth had him convinced. The worst part was the mind games she played. She'd move my stuff around and then tell Dad I was messy or that I'd broken something. Dad believed everything she said because, after all, why would she lie? She had him completely under her control. Then came the day that changed everything. I was walking home from school, taking my usual shortcut through Wilson Park, when I saw Beth with some guy by the old gazebo. At first, I thought it was just a friend or something, but then I saw them kissing. Not just a quick kiss, but a full-on kiss. I think Beth saw me running away, but I wasn't sure. I recognized the guy too. His name was Mark, I think. He used to come over for some charity meetings Beth claimed to run. He was a big guy, always in fancy suits, looked like he lived at the gym. I didn't know what to do. Tell Dad? Yeah, right. He'd never believe me. Beth had spent years making sure he thought I was just a troublemaker. Plus, Jenny was only 8 at the time, and Dad was obsessed with her. He'd probably think I was just jealous or trying to stir up problems, so I kept quiet, trying to forget what I saw. But then, I started noticing other things I couldn't ignore, like how Jenny's hair was this strange reddish-brown color that nobody else had. Dad never noticed because he was always distracted. One night, I got up for some water and overheard Beth on the phone. I was about to walk into the kitchen, but the second I heard her tone, I stopped. She was whispering, but I caught enough to make my stomach drop. "You don't understand, Mark. He's starting to notice." At first, I didn't know who she was talking about, but then I heard her say it. She was talking about Jenny. She said, "He thinks she's his, but we both know the truth." It hit me like a ton of bricks. Jenny wasn't Dad's daughter. Mark was her father. I must have made a sound because Beth went quiet and then called out in her overly sweet voice, "Honey, you shouldn't be up this late." I rushed back to my room before she could see me, my heart racing. I didn't have proof, but I knew the truth. And I knew Beth would do anything to keep me from telling Dad. It wasn't long before Beth figured out I knew something. She started watching me constantly, especially when I was around Jenny. I couldn't even walk past Jenny's room without Beth suddenly appearing and asking what I was doing. She started telling Dad that I was acting weird around Jenny. I get it now. She was trying to plant doubt in Dad's mind, making him suspicious of me. I remember one time I was just helping Jenny with her multiplication tables, basic math stuff. Beth barged in, yanked Jenny away, saying she'd help instead. then told Dad I was getting too close to her. The way she said it still makes me sick. For about 2 weeks, this went on. Beth scrutinizing everything I did, whispering things to Dad when she thought I couldn't hear. Dad started giving me strange looks at dinner. I tried to stay out of the house as much as possible, but that only made things worse. Beth told Dad I was probably on drugs, and nobody bothered to check if I was okay. No one cared that my grades were slipping because I was so stressed. Dad just got angrier and angrier. 2 weeks after I saw Beth with Mark in the park, I came home from school, and something felt off. When I walked in, there were 2 police cars outside. I could hear Beth crying even before I opened the door, her fake sobbing. I walked in and saw her on the couch, crying her eyes out, with 2 cops sitting across from her. Dad was standing in the corner, looking like he was about to explode. Jenny was nowhere to be seen. Everyone stopped talking and stared at me. One of the cops stood up and asked if we could talk. They took me to the kitchen while the other cops stayed with Beth and Dad. That's when they told me that Beth and Jenny had accused me of touching Jenny inappropriately. I couldn't even process it. My brain just went blank, and I kept repeating, "No, that didn't happen." But they kept asking horrible questions about where I touched her and how many times I threatened her to stay quiet. It felt like I was going to puke. I could hear Beth still crying in the other room, saying things like, "I should have known. I saw the signs." Dad wasn't saying anything, just standing there, fists clenched. The cops asked if I wanted to make a statement. I told them Beth was lying, that she was trying to get rid of me because I knew she was cheating on Dad. Big mistake. They didn't believe me. Dad went berserk when he heard me say that, screaming that I was trying to ruin his marriage out of jealousy. He called me every name under the sun, said I was sick and needed help. The cops couldn't find any evidence, obviously, since nothing had happened, and I was only 15. But the damage was done. Dad threw a garbage bag at me, told me to pack my things and leave in 10 minutes, and if I ever came near Jenny again, he'd kill me. I tried one last time to tell him about Beth and Mark, but he grabbed me by my shirt and shoved me toward the stairs. I'd never seen him that angry. Beth was standing there, smirking. Only I could see it. I packed whatever I could fit in the bag, took my school backpack, and tried to grab my Game Boy. But Dad said everything in the house was his because he paid for it. While I was upstairs, I could hear Beth downstairs, probably making sure Dad stayed angry. When I came back down, Jenny was there, looking confused, not understanding what was happening. Beth had her arms around Jenny, acting like she was protecting her from me. That's what hurt the most, the look on Jenny's face. She was just a kid, and Beth used her to get rid of me. Dad told me to give him my house key, saying I wasn't his son anymore. Beth made this fake sad face and said, "Maybe someday you'll get the help you need." I wanted to scream that she was the one who needed help, but what was the point? They weren't going to believe me. They watched me leave, probably making sure I actually went. I looked back once, and Dad was holding Jenny, while Beth kept up her fake crying. The last thing I heard was Dad telling Jenny she was safe now. I wandered around for hours that night, had about $40 in my wallet, and no idea what to do. I couldn't go to any friends' houses because Beth had already told their parents I was a predator. She'd planned it all. I ended up finding an abandoned building where some homeless guys let me stay that night. That's where I lived for the next few months. I couldn't go to school or get a real job because I was only 15. I did some things I'm not proud of to survive. The worst part was that Beth made sure everyone in town knew her version of the story. I couldn't go anywhere without people giving me dirty looks. I lost all my friends, and even the teachers who used to like me ignored me. My whole life was gone. That's why I had to leave town. I spent about 6 months in that abandoned warehouse by the train tracks, living with a few other guys. Tom, an older guy who had been living on the streets after losing his wife and job, took me under his wing. He taught me how to survive. I kept thinking Dad would come to his senses and get me, but he never did. He didn't care. I tried to get jobs, but nobody would hire me. Even McDonald's turned me down. Eventually, Tom told me to leave town and start fresh somewhere else. But I was scared. I was just a kid. Where was I supposed to go? One night, the cops showed up at the warehouse, and we got kicked out. I lost most of my stuff. Tom and I walked to the next town over, and that night we ended up at a truck stop diner. Tom told me he had a cousin in the city who might be able to help me. The city was 200 miles away, but what else could I do? Tom gave me his cousin's address and the last $40 he had. He told me to leave while I still could because he was too old to start over. I never saw Tom again after that. I took a Greyhound to the city and spent my first week sleeping in the bus station. Finally, I found Tom's cousin, Dave. He was a clean-cut guy who managed a few restaurants. He gave me a job washing dishes at a fancy Italian restaurant. The first few months were tough. I slept in the restaurant's storage room, and Dave let me crash there after hours. I saved every penny I could, and eventually, I had enough to rent a small room in a rough part of town. But at least I had a start. Mine started by learning everything I could about the restaurant business. I moved up from doing dishes to prep cooking, then became a line cook. The head chef noticed my aptitude for numbers and began teaching me about food costs and inventory management. One regular customer, Amy, came in with her mom twice a week and always sat in my section after I became a waiter. Amy was studying business at college, so we'd chat whenever things weren't too busy. She was the first person in years who didn't treat me like I was worthless. I remember the first thing she said to me one night. "Hey, what's good here?" she asked, actually looking at me instead of the menu. "The carbonara is pretty great. Marco makes the sauce from scratch," I said, probably sounding like an idiot. "You actually know who makes the food?" She smiled. "Most places, the servers just rattle off the specials and disappear." We ended up talking for about 10 minutes about food, while her mom sat there smiling. Later, I heard her mom say, "Amy, stop bothering the poor waiter. He has other tables." Amy just looked around the empty restaurant and laughed. "Yeah, Mom, he's clearly swamped." They started coming in more often, always requesting my section. Amy would sometimes bring her homework, and one night she was struggling with some accounting stuff. "This makes no sense," she groaned, staring at her textbook. "How can a company lose money but still show a profit?" "Creative accounting," I said while refilling her water. "They're probably moving numbers around to make it look good for investors." She looked at me as if I had grown another head. "How do you know about corporate accounting?" The truth was I had been reading business books at the library, trying to understand how restaurants worked in case I wanted to open my own one day. I told her, and she got really excited. "That's amazing. Most people our age don't care about this stuff. Hey, want to look at this problem with me?" Next thing I knew, I was sitting at her table during my break, helping her with her homework. Her mom just watched us with a knowing smile. This went on for months. Amy and I would talk business whenever she came in, and I tried not to fall in love with her. Failed miserably at that part, by the way. She was so smart, but never made me feel dumb. There was this one time, though, when she said, "I don't get why you're working here. You're clearly good at this business stuff." "Not everyone can afford college," I mumbled, embarrassed. "You don't need college to be successful," she said. "My dad never went, and he owns 3 companies now. He says experience matters more than degrees." That conversation stuck with me. I started to think maybe I could do more than just work in restaurants. I eventually got my GED by studying at the library on my days off. Amy helped me with the math parts, and she never asked about my past. I never told her because I was afraid she'd stop talking to me if she knew. That was my life for about 5 years. Wake up, work, study, sleep, repeat. I didn't date or make friends. I just focused on surviving and trying to improve. The whole time, I kept thinking about Jenny, hoping Beth wasn't messing her up too much. One night, Amy came in looking super excited. "Guess what? Dad's looking for someone to help manage his new property development project. Entry-level position, but lots of room to grow. You should apply." I froze. "Amy, I never even finished high school." "But you got your GED, right? That's all that matters. Come on, just try. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen was that she'd find out about my past, about Beth's lies, about everything. But Amy kept pushing. "Please, for me. Dad trusts my judgment, and I know you'd be amazing at this." So I applied. I had to borrow a suit from Dave, and it fit weirdly. The interview was terrifying. Amy's dad just stared at me for a full minute before speaking. "Amy says you understand business. Prove it." Somehow, I managed to talk intelligently about property development trends I'd read about, and even suggested ideas for his new project. At the end, he just nodded and said, "You start Monday." When I told Amy I got the job, she hugged me. It was the first time anyone had hugged me in years, and I almost cried right there in the restaurant. "See," she said, "I told you you could do it." That job changed everything. Her dad became like the father I had always wished for. He actually listened when I had ideas and taught me everything about real estate development. Within a year, I was managing my own projects. The whole time, Amy and I got closer. We'd get coffee after work and talk for hours, but I never asked her out, thinking about Beth's lies and my past. Amy deserved better than someone who had lived on the streets. Then came the night that changed everything. We were working late on a project proposal. Just the two of us in the office. "You know," Amy said suddenly, "for someone so smart about business, you're really dumb about some things." "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked me right in the eyes. "I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask me out." I just sat there, stunned, like an idiot. Finally, I managed to say, "I'm not good enough for you, Amy. There's stuff about me you don't know." "Try me," she said. So I told her everything, about Beth, the lies, being homeless. I kept waiting for her to look disgusted or scared, but instead she started crying. Then she got mad. Not at me, but at Beth and my dad. "How could they do that to their own son?" she said. Then she kissed me. Just reached across the desk and kissed me. And that's how Amy and I finally got together. But life has a way of bringing up the past when you least expect it. Amy and I got married pretty quickly after we started dating. Her family was amazing. They actually treated me like a son. We had our first kid, a boy, and bought a beautiful 5-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. Life was perfect. Then, about 3 months ago, I was scrolling through Facebook at work and saw a friend request. The profile picture showed my dad looking much older than I remembered. I just stared at my phone, unable to move. Amy noticed something was off the moment she got home. I was sitting in our kitchen, just staring. "Babe, what's wrong?" she asked, putting our son down for his nap. "Dad found me on Facebook," I said. "He sent a friend request." She sat down next to me. "What are you going to do?" I had no idea. "Haven't opened his message yet. Want me to read it first?" I handed her my phone. She opened the message and began reading aloud. "Son, I know it's been a long time. I'm getting older now, and I've been thinking a lot about the past. Not a day goes by that I don't think about you. Beth and I want to make things right. Jenny misses her big brother. Please give us a chance to explain. Love, Dad." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Jenny misses me? She probably doesn't even remember me. She was 8 when everything happened. Amy squeezed my hand. "You don't have to respond." But I did. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I wanted to know why now, after 16 years. So, I accepted the request and messaged back, "Why now?" His response came quickly. "I'm 58 now. Had some health scares. Made me realize life's too short for grudges. Jenny's getting married soon. Would mean a lot to have you there." We messaged back and forth for a few weeks. I found out Jenny was 24 now, working in marketing, engaged to some lawyer guy. Beth was still the same, according to Dad. Yeah, bet she is, I thought. Amy kept telling me to be careful. "People don't change that much," she said. But I wanted to believe Dad had changed. Stupid, right? They asked to visit. Amy said it was my choice, but she'd support whatever I decided. So I said yes. Big mistake. They showed up on a Saturday morning. Dad looked old, really old. Gray hair, walking with a slight limp. Beth looked exactly the same. Still had that fake smile. Jenny had grown up and looked even more like Mark now. But no one seemed to notice, except me. The first few minutes were awkward. Nobody knew what to say. Then Jenny saw our family photos. "Is this your son?" she asked, looking at pictures of our 3-year-old. "Yeah, that's Jake," I said. "I'm an aunt," she whispered before bursting into tears. Beth immediately went to comfort her. Same old Beth. Dad stepped into my house like he belonged there, eyes sweeping over everything with the barely hidden approval he never used to give me. "You've done well for yourself," he said, nodding. "Real estate development, huh? Never would have guessed." I folded my arms, already bracing for whatever this visit was really about. "Amy's dad gave me a chance," I said, letting the words hang. "Unlike some people, The silence stretched before Beth jumped in, trying to ease the tension. "We all made mistakes back then," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "We're here to make things right." Amy, who had been standing near the door like she was waiting for an excuse to leave, took the opportunity. "I'll check on Jake," she said, disappearing before she could say something she'd regret. Smart move. Jenny, however, had no filter. She wandered through the living room, fingers skimming across the furniture, the walls, like she was trying to claim it. "This house is amazing," she said, peering down the hallway. 5 bedrooms, but you only have 1 kid? I forced a polite smile. "Planning for more," I said. "We use one as an office. Not that it's any of your business." Dad clapped me on the shoulder, steering me toward my office with his typical, "let's talk man-to-man" routine. That should have been my first warning. He sank into my chair like he owned it. "Son," he began, "I need to ask you something important." I stayed standing. "What?" "Your sister's getting married, starting a family," he said, letting that hang in the air like it was supposed to mean something to me. "They're looking for a house, but everything's so expensive these days." My stomach churned. "No way," I said, already seeing where this was going. "You've got all this space," he continued, gesturing around like he was selling me my own damn home. 5 bedrooms for 3 people. Jenny and Steve could really use a place like this. You're doing well. You could easily buy another house. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "Are you seriously asking me to give my house to Jenny?" "Well, not give exactly," he said, like that somehow made it better. "Maybe sell it to them cheap. You make good money now." I literally lost it. "No." He sighed, exasperated, like I was the one being difficult. "Son, be reasonable. It's your sister. The sister you chose over me." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "The one you kicked me out for? That sister? That was a misunderstanding." He barked out a laugh. "A misunderstanding? You threw me out at 15. I lived on the streets." He had the nerve to look annoyed like I was dragging up something inconvenient. "That's in the past. Jenny needs—" My voice rose. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Jenny needs? What about what I needed? A father who believed me?" Before he could come up with another excuse, Beth rushed in, that fake concerned look on her face. "Everything okay in here?" I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh yeah, Beth. Everything's fantastic." I turned to her, a grin sharp enough to cut. "Dad's just asking me to give my house to your daughter. You know, the one who isn't even his." The room went completely silent. Beth's face drained of color. Dad froze. Jenny came in looking confused, probably trying to figure out if she'd heard me right. Just like that, the whole game changed. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I just walked out of my office and went to find Amy and Jake. I found them in the backyard, Jake playing with his trucks while Amy watched him. One look at my face, and she knew something had happened. She took Jake inside while everyone else was still processing what I'd said. Beth tried damage control, telling Dad I was lying, that I was just trying to hurt them like I always did. Classic Beth move. But Dad wasn't buying it this time. Maybe he finally understood. Because Jenny was standing right there looking exactly like Mark, or maybe Dad had always had doubts. He demanded a DNA test right there. Jenny began crying. This wasn't the fake kind like her mom's, but real, confused tears. She kept asking what was going on and why everyone was yelling. Beth grabbed her and practically dragged her out of our house, accusing me of just causing trouble again, of trying to ruin their lives because I was jealous. Dad stayed behind. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there in our living room, staring at nothing. Then he asked me how I knew, so I told him everything. About seeing Beth with Mark in the park when I was 15. About how Jenny looked exactly like him. About how Beth framed me when she realized I might tell someone. He didn't believe me at first, insisting that I was wrong and that Beth would never do such a thing. But I could see the doubt starting to eat away at him. All those little things that never made sense before. The way Jenny had red-brown hair that neither of them had. Her facial features that didn't match anyone in the family. Beth's constant need to keep me away from Jenny. They were all suddenly making sense. The next week was a whirlwind. Dad actually went and got that DNA test done. When he got the results, he came straight to my office, didn't even wait to get home. He just walked in, sat down, and broke down crying. The test showed 0 chance he was Jenny's father. Everything he thought he knew about his life for the past 24 years was a lie. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even happy, that this was proof I had been telling the truth all along. But watching my dad cry in my office just left me feeling empty. This man who had always seemed so strong, who had terrified me as a kid, now looked completely broken. He asked about Mark. Did I know where he was, what he did? I told him what little I knew. Mark used to hang around homeless spots, usually messed up on something. I hadn't seen him in years, though. No idea if he was even still alive. Dad walked out of my office, looking like he'd aged 2 decades in 10 minutes. But he wasn't defeated. He was furious. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they could deal with their own mess. It wasn't my problem anymore. Then the next day, Amy called me at work. It turned out Dad had gone home and completely lost it. Beth tried to spin it, as always, claiming the test was wrong, that the lab had made a mistake. But for the first time, Dad wasn't buying it. Decades of manipulation and lies came crashing down all at once, and he snapped. He didn't just yell, he hurt her badly. She ended up in the hospital with 3 fractured vertebrae. The doctors said she'd probably need pain meds for the rest of her life. Jenny was the one who called the cops, and Dad got arrested right there in their living room. They're talking about 3 to 5 years, considering his clean record and his age, which might work in his favor. But Beth's family is pushing for the maximum sentence, and Jenny's whole world collapsed overnight. The wedding's off. Turns out her fancy lawyer fiancé wasn't interested in inheriting that level of baggage. Now she's been blowing up my phone, asking me to help her find her real dad. Amy keeps telling me to block them all, to walk away and be done with it, and she's probably right. But part of me can't. Not for Beth. Not for Dad. But for Jenny. She didn't ask for any of this. Everything she thought was true about her life has just turned into a lie. Then today, I heard that Beth's already hooked on pain meds. Her family checked her into rehab. Jenny's staying with her aunt and refuses to even speak to Beth. Dad's looking at real prison time. Their perfect little family is gone, just like that. And the weirdest part? I don't feel good about any of it. I thought proving I was telling the truth would feel satisfying, like I'd finally get some kind of justice. But instead, it just feels empty, like watching a house burn down long after there's nothing left inside to save. But at that moment, I was focusing on my family. Amy was pregnant again, this time with a girl. And those extra bedrooms were finally going to good use, just not in the way Dad and Beth had expected. Funny how life works out sometimes. However, after about 2 months, everything became even more complicated. Dad's trial was last month. I didn't go. My lawyer advised against it. Plus, I honestly didn't want to see any of them. I found out through Jenny that he got 3 years. Could have been worse. But the judge took his age and clean record into account. Still, at 58, 3 years is a long time. Beth's still in rehab. Turns out, she had been taking pain pills way before Dad put her in the hospital. Her sister told Jenny that Beth had been using them for years, just hiding it really well. It makes sense now why she was always paranoid and making up crazy stuff. Beth's looking at least 6 more months of treatment. Jenny's not doing great. She went looking for Mark on her own, asking around at homeless shelters and stuff. She finally found someone who knew him. Turns out he died 2 years ago from an overdose behind some convenience store. Jenny completely broke down when she found out. She's been texting me these long messages at 3 a.m., talking about how her whole life feels like a lie. She says she can't even look in the mirror anymore because all she sees is Mark's face. I feel bad for her, but Amy says I need to keep my distance. She's right. Every time I respond to Jenny, she gets more attached and starts asking more questions about the past. The weirdest part? Jenny's ex-fiancé tried reaching out to me. He wanted to know if the crazy ran in the family because he was worried about having kids with her. I told him to get lost. Yeah, Jenny's going through a lot, but she doesn't deserve that kind of judgment. I found out Beth's been telling people I made up the whole thing about Mark just to get revenge. Even with the DNA test proving Jenny isn't Dad's kid, she's still trying to make me look like the bad guy. Some of our old neighbors actually believe her. I guess small-town people love drama. Amy's pregnancy is going well. We're having a girl. Sometimes I watch my son play and think about Jenny at that age. It makes me wonder if things would have turned out differently if Dad had noticed the signs earlier, or if I had told someone about seeing Beth with Mark. But you can't change the past, right? The house feels different now. Like all that negative energy from when they visited is finally gone. We're turning Jenny's future room, the one Dad wanted us to give her, into a nursery for the baby. Amy's got it all planned out. Pink and gray theme, little stars on the ceiling. I still think about Tom sometimes, the homeless guy who helped me when I first got kicked out. I wish I could tell him how things turned out. Show him that I made something of myself like he said I could. I hope he's okay, wherever he is. I've been getting messages from Dad's side of the family. Some are supporting him. Some are angry about what he did to Beth. None of them ever cared where I was all those years I was homeless. Funny how family works, sometimes. That's pretty much where things stand now. Not sure there's much more to tell. Life goes on, you know. But to everyone who's been following this story and sending support, thanks. Writing all this out helped more than I thought it would. Special thanks to the person who suggested therapy. You were right. Jenny messaged me one last time yesterday. She's moving out of state, starting fresh somewhere new. She asked if we could stay in touch. I told her, maybe someday, but not now. I need to focus on my own family for a while. That's it, I guess. Story's over. No more drama. No updates needed. Sometimes the best revenge is just being happy, you know?